Hello and welcome to the Wednesday check-in presented by the Gokhstein News Network. I am your host, Landy, and today is September 24th, 2025, and we're looking at Bitcoin here on the daily to start. And I am actually going to start by talking a little bit about macroeconomics. So on Thursday's session, which is open right now, it's still Wednesday for me here in the US, but and during Thursday's session, we will get GDP data. So I don't know how that's going to affect price action, to be quite honest. If it's a big miss in terms of like contraction or something, maybe we see it affect price action. But there are some things that are being set in on the chart that might play out regardless of what the numbers actually come in as. But I did want to touch on it for just a moment. So let's flip over to the Forex Factory calendar here. So on Thursday, we'll get the final GDP quarter over quarter. Now we've gotten preliminary numbers here, but of course it is the end of the monthly and the quarterly. So we're going to get some final data in. Expected 3.3% is expected for GDP. So kind of matching what the previous was. We'll see if we continue to see growth. I think we did get quite a bit over on some of the projections coming in. So we'll see if it comes in over. Unemployment claims were a little bit higher, but not really anything. But we do have durable goods. That is something to watch and to see how the market reacts, because traditional markets getting a little bit of a correction could turn into a bigger correction depending on some of that data, and that might actually bleed over into Bitcoin land and of course crypto at large. But for the moment, Bitcoin did hit our area of interest to the downside at the weekly at the 112 area, right? So we talked about this move down to 112. We last spoke on Monday where we did see it dip into the 112 or below 112 into that big weekly zone. And then, of course, the next big area was a daily area, essentially around 109.5 to like 111. Well, we did now get here on the Wednesday low that tag of 111. So that has now run its course. We did not get a low set. But we do have a swing low set from yesterday, and that is going to be 111 and 66 bucks here. We didn't actually close the low. It narrowly avoided closing the low. Looks like it did, but it didn't. The high from the Tuesday candle came in at 113.357, and the close came in at 113.348. So there is the potential for some hidden bullish divergence here. Now, likely on a single drive like that, looking right back to the overhead resistance, provided it can actually set the low on a close. The swing low set, yep, but the closing low is not set yet. Now, if it's going to do that, it might just do it all at once, like set the closing low and go and test overhead resistance. And we'll discuss that in just a moment here. But I wanted to show you that that is reflecting on most RSI indicators. Momentum still down, but could turn back up on closes above 116, which essentially the area overhead above 114.750, which was the breakdown. It was a clear breakdown on lower term timeframes like the 4-hour here, for instance. This close open right here was at that 114.7 area. In this case, it closed slightly below 114.750, which was the swing low of the tighter range before or after putting in the high at 123, before the retest of 112 and then the run back to 124.5. Well, that swing low was kind of a lower term time frame area of interest to pay attention to. And again, it worked out. We came down, we hit that big weekly level, even dipped below, hit the daily down there by 111. And now, I'll be honest, it kind of looks like it wants to keel over, but that's not always the case. If it can hang on the top side here around the 113 area, it might try up. But the big area overhead would be the 114.750 to 115.716 area, which happens to be the daily pivot. So watch out for that. We'll see kind of what tomorrow brings in terms of economic data. see if it gets the market excited. But again, this is the last week of the month and quarterly, so there's a lot of liquidity moving around. All right, so even had a really good conversation earlier today on a Spaces event with Nat, who brought up the M2 rising, right? And that's because we were getting the big roll off of the quad witching into cash, and then getting ready to see where that's going to be deployed into the markets or kept in cash or so on and so forth. And of course, traditional markets getting a little bit of a correction here in the last week of the quarter as well. So now big area overhead, you can see the basis band is right at 114.3. So we essentially need to see a close above there to go, and even in lower term time frames, 114.3, 114.4 area to go test 114.750. You can see how Bitcoin, when testing the main area of overhead resistance here between 115.7 and 117.8. Again, you can call it 116 to 118 if you want. On some perps and futures charts, it is. But in this case here on spot, it's 115.7 to 117.8. And if we start to see closes, even in lower term timeframes, above 114.4, 114.5, expect a test up to 114.750, possibly even that 115.7, 116 area. If we do see price trading above there, it's right back in the thick of the resistance between that 116 and 118 essentially. I need to see closes above 118 and that upper second standard deviation just above there. And in fact, even in lower term timeframes, if you do see 118 starting to get closed above in lower term timeframes, look right to this swing high at around 118.650. If we see closes above there and then follow through on the daily, if we haven't already tested up further to 120 to 121, I would expect a test up there. And only on closes above there do I think shorts have to reposition. And then we're looking at that 123 to 125 area up top. That being said, if we see 112 dropped, expect the dailies and the Wednesday low in this case to be tested somewhere around 109.5 to that 111 again. If that fails, we're looking at 109, anywhere below there, big daily level at that 108.250 to 107.250. And of course, that is the weekly high or low. And I do want to remind you that part of what we have to watch out for is we have lower low close with lower low swing, lower low close on lower low close, lower high close on a swing, and a close over here as well. So we have, two parts of a trend here, and this being a trend reversal setup. That doesn't mean it's going to complete on the 5-day. Now we are going to see this close on Wednesday, but I did want to just bring it up again. Even if we do see price dip down into that daily, there is a lower first there. But if it starts to kind of get down below there in terms of volatility levels of interest and where they are, the lower seconds down at that 105, 106 level. So it ends up being a bearish continuation, reversal setup confirmation kind of a look if we were to see any kind of trading below that weekly between 109 and 112. But that's not a foregone conclusion. We're moving from expansion to compression in kind of a range right now. And we can even get, trend reversal setups that look like they're going to complete and or show that they're going to complete and confirm that get rejected and bounce in times like this, like off lower seconds and then come back up and start to break trend again, so on and so forth. And in fact, this downtrend would break on closes above 118. So that would be a trend break, right? Just like we had the trend break where the uptrend was broken on closes below the 112 region. 118 would be the downtrend break for the 5-day. And we really need to watch this on Saturday as we head into Sunday. And of course, I'll remind you of it on Friday during the video for the Friday wrap up. But, we want to see Bitcoin kind of pick itself up here, maybe even put in a higher low as it relates to this last low on the 5-day going into next week, and then the weekly, so on and so forth, because the weekly's ugly right now. The weekly is showing, it's in a compression, but it's showing that it could potentially below that 114.4 area. It could potentially, throw a lower high, right? And we already have a swing downtrend. This, of course, would be a closing high up here and a closing higher low. but then a closing lower high in the midst of a swing downtrend would look like it wants to go and try and test for a break of trend on a closing basis, seeing as the swing trend is already down. And that is what we need to keep our eye on coming into the end of this week, and not really anything else too concerning there. Bitcoin's kind of hanging out. We're getting the bounces in the expected areas. Now it's about whether or not it can hold this weekly level, especially on a close. Nice close open right there at that 112 region, and then try to break back above 118. That would look really good for the bulls here going forward into Q4, but just keep a close eye on it. And the other big thing is, and I said I was going to look at it on Monday, and I'm so sorry I did not. I just brain farted. But the biggest thing here is we still have an uptrend on the monthly. Last higher low is still down here at 82.5, with that higher low swing at 74.420.69. I actually had a good conversation. Charles Edwards hopped on a space that I was on earlier today. Shout out to Wolf Bitcoin and Cade and the crew over there. Hopped on there, and I had a chance to ask him a really quick question to kind of compare to some of the metrics that I have for mining production costs, like for internal metrics that I have versus what some of the stuff that he's been tracking. He's been doing it for a very long time. And electrical cost floor is somewhere around, 72, maybe 74, depending on power plant agreements here in the U.S. And kind of generally power overall in terms of power cost to produce Bitcoin in Bitcoin dollar terms. And production cost is somewhere around the upper $80,000 region. So that's total production cost, factoring everything in. And the electrical floor is typically the actual floor of price. And in fact, I don't have a reference for it right now, but I can tell you that the last time that it actually hit electrical cost was back here in March of 2020 for a grand total of 5 minutes. It was individual. It was oscillating above and below, but 5 1-minute candles closed below electrical cost, and that was it. And then it was up, and away. And that's almost always setting the floor. Can it move down as if we move into a bearish trend and, operations are spinning down and that kind of, yeah, I don't really see that happening though. We're seeing more and more miners come online. We're picking up the pace in many cases in terms of mining activity. And that means that it being so close to the last higher low on the monthly for the electrical costs, somewhere, 72 to 74, that's right around the last higher low on the monthly. That's wild. We haven't seen that in quite a long time. So, while I am still looking at traditional market cycle, 4-year cycle for Bitcoin Q4 to Q1 of next year, as a potential major high area, potentially a macro high area, I've mentioned a lot that I believe that the door is wide open for a lengthening cycle. And that was, he did confirm that his number is very close to what I have for internal metrics. And it's going to be interesting because the door is wide open for this to be a lengthening cycle. But I still have to see criteria being met. And I wanted to touch on this again because we're in a compression on the monthly, and this could go either way, but we're definitely not expanding to the downside below $45,000 here. I don't see that anytime in terms of expansion on the monthly, at least not anytime soon. If anything, Bitcoin hangs on the highs and chops around, makes new highs, and then compresses further and then gets downside expansion. I just don't see it. It's not presenting itself in fundamentals on the network and other types of fundamentals that are being tracked. Your glass nodes, your coin glasses, your crypto quants, and so on and so forth. Just not seeing those metrics just yet. And the other big thing is the quarterly. And I'm going to talk about this next week. The quarterly has not hit that expansion. We've gotten volatility expansion, but we have not kicked off Bollinger Band expansion. So we haven't seen a true expansion out of Bitcoin yet on the longer term time frame like a quarterly. And although the monthly could go into a compression again, I think downside expansion would be limited, especially considering some of the fundamentals for the network itself and other types of fundamentals that are factored into to Bitcoin, like your quant fundamentals. So the door remains open. But as an analyst, I have to stick with what we have for historical data until it breaks in terms of cycle timing, right? So I wanted to kind of quickly explain that, but I'm very open to the possibility of a lengthening cycle. Just need to see the metrics start lining up with price action on the chart. That's all. And I wanted to get that out of the way and then go check on Ethereum real quick here. So essentially for Bitcoin on the daily, you want to see closes above 114.4 that go test 114.750 and then up into the main overhead resistance between essentially 116 and 118. You want to see closes above 118 to have a shot to test further up, especially on a closing basis. No swings to that 118.650 and fails. We want to see it continue to march on, get closes above 118 and go and test that 120 to 121. That's the next major area above 118. And then, of course, above 121, rather, the shorts really have no cover. I think they've got cover, but they don't have much, and they would have to reposition. So that would likely lead to price going higher to retest the all-time high area, 123 to 125, potentially 125 to 128. And then we come back to it later for maybe further targets if they get squeezed out. Now, downside, you want to see 112 hold on retests. Otherwise, it's going to fill out that weekly between 109 and 112 initially, and then we come back to it. Now, for Ethereum, that's Litecoin. For Ethereum did break structure, and it broke swing structure on the weekly already, right? So it's already going to be a swing lower low with a swing lower high in place. But I've mentioned, because this was an aggressive expansion to the upside, we need to see compression. I don't view this as long-term bearish. In fact, I think it's quite the opposite. It's probably pretty bullish at the moment. The one big thing that I'm going to point out here, and I'm going to have to turn off all of this mess that I have here, and you'll have to forgive me. I'm sorry about that. But let's go ahead and turn all of this mess off and take a look at the weekly here. Or I'm sorry, the monthly. Now, we had the nice bull market uptrend, nice higher low to a lower high swing with equal high. So a double top to lower low to a higher high. So essentially, Ethereum is consolidating on longer term time frames. And on the monthly, as it compares to the last low, it's very highly likely going to put in a higher low on the monthly time frame. And this is kind of a range right now. So the last higher low on even a closing basis, all the way down at basically 1800 with that swing low at 1383. Now, of course, this was back in April during the big Six Sigma event. It hit some areas, some technical areas of interest. This low over here, and to the closing higher low here at that 1645 to the swing low at that 1370, 1400 area. So it dipped right into a key area of liquidity, bounced all the way up to the top side here. I'd be expecting higher low structure on the monthly from Ethereum from here. Kind of no matter what Bitcoin does, I'd be looking for that. Now, whether that would lead to a consolidation or a trend reversal setup on the monthly remains to be seen. Coming off of higher highs, higher low, we'd have to be looking right back to the highs in the next big area, or else it'd be lower highs into consolidation. And honestly, it's a bullish setup because it has a trend break and a close and a swing. So the only problem here is the close is lower than the prior cycle close at that 4,635, right? But in terms of the more recent trend, this would be a closing higher high with a closing swing high. We need to see closes back above essentially 4630. It's a big weekly level. And then, of course, go on to march up. But if it did pull back into higher low structure, I wouldn't be surprised. Whether that's going to do that from here or not remains to be seen. This is just a red monthly so far. doesn't mean a lot until we see like an actual high put in. But just wanted to give my thoughts on that real quick. And, above 3,900, it's fine. And essentially, you could take the close open structure over here around 3,900. Need to see that area hold up as support to the downside. Remain above 4K essentially would look really good. Otherwise, it's going to test that area. And then we come back to it later. This is a consolidation structure. Just kind of riding the lower second. Bulls need to see this pop up back above 4,500 and really start to work the top side again. And otherwise, it's likely going to test 4K 3,900 area and possibly lower. And then we get that potentially that high starting to look like it's going to form, but we would have to see what next month looks like. One single red candle does not beget a high unless it's like a total dump off. And that's pretty much all I got for you today. Not going to look at too much else. And I'll just follow up on Friday with everybody. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week and a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out. Take care. Talk to you Friday.